Welcome to DFW Running Talk. I'm Chris Detzel, so let's get started. All right, welcome to another DFW Running Talk. I'm Chris Detzel, and today we have special guest, Dr. Jose Lopez. Jose, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Chris?
And how does that feel to be called doctor? You've earned that, right?
Yeah, I graduated in 2017. It's still new, but the students that I teach at the university, they call me. So in Spanish, people that are named Jose, their nickname is Pepe. Though I tell my students, just call me Dr. Pepe. It's short, it's simple. And so that's what they know me by. But yeah, it's something different because it's not necessarily a medical doctor. It's more of a mental health clinician. But yeah, that's my professional field.
I love that. And that actually helps me understand why Pepe de Runner is, we call him Pepe. Like I was just thinking he was
Mhm.
just being funny. And actually, there's a reason because it's Pepe in Spanish.
Yeah.
His name, Jose.
In
So,
Spanish, a lot of names have a nickname.
yeah,
Francisco, they're known as like Paco,
yeah.
or sometimes they even shorten it. So there's a runner that I've known for over a decade now. His name's Alicio, but they shorten it to Licho. In Spanish, you may hear either their real name or a certain short name, or just a nickname to go with their name.
Okay, that is so intriguing. I had no idea. And then for everybody else that's listening to this, hopefully you learned something today. One of the things that I wanted to get into is your background around running. And look, a lot of us know who you are. And one of the things you're known for, and you have a little community around you and running kind of these slow miles, long miles. Sometimes we won't get into that yet, but I do want to talk about that in a minute. I was like, man, Jose goes to these races and he's super fast. Sometimes he wins them. They're local and things like that. But when I look at your Strava or what you've run, you're running 9 or 10 minute miles and 19 miles or all constantly. So we'll get into that in a minute, but would love to know a little bit more about your running journey, why you got started, how you got started, and those kinds of things.
Yeah, sure. So as a kid, we were immigrants. My parents brought my brother and I when we were children. So to us, Dallas was really a new place. And both my parents, when they came, they didn't really know the language. We moved here. It was a neighborhood called Little Mexico, which is now Uptown off Oaklawn and Douglas. So that neighborhood really, and again, now that I can, now that I'm as a parent, now I see what they went through.
Mm.
So really as a kid, I remember just being very hyperactive, being all over the place. And again, back then, they didn't really know what ADHD was. They didn't really understand a lot of the mental health issues that we know now. So really as a kid, I remember in elementary school, not even being able to sit in a desk, I would
Yeah.
literally fall off those plastic chairs because
You're just moving around so much and
yeah,
stuff. Yeah.
and again, I didn't really understand it, but all I knew was whenever it was recess or whenever it was PE, yeah, that was the time to go play soccer. I remember going to Sam Houston Elementary and then Travis Elementary, again in the Uptown area, and just loving movement. I loved chasing the ball. I loved whatever sport it was. It really didn't matter. It was just something that I gravitated to because most of the day it was like sit in this hard
Mhm.
plastic chair. And again, my parents, they were just focused on surviving. They were focused on doing whatever type of manual labor to keep the
Getting to meet.
and I didn't really know about sports. I didn't really have an opportunity to participate in any youth sports or any recreation leagues or things like that. I just knew that it was just something that I gravitated to. My body really just
Needed.
right wanted that movement. That those were my elementary days. Then when we were upper elementary, now into the middle school, as far as sports, that's when I started to learn more about what sports were. But again, I didn't really have that opportunity of going in any league. It was more just kind of street football, street basketball. And then we moved to Pleasant Grove area, Lake June, that neighborhood. My brother and I, we started to meet neighborhood kids. We would run around playing basketball, playing football, just really any type of activity. And to me, that especially newer generations, I think that is one thing that I say they're missing out on. Just that notion of being out in the street with the neighborhood kids
Yeah.
and just it was either it was shirts versus skins or it was just such an organic kids play, didn't involve any cell phones, any
That's right.
technology.
Yeah.
And to me, when I think about my childhood, not to romanticize it, but to me, those were such good learning opportunities where you learned. I remember Pleasant Grove was a really changing neighborhood. Traditionally, you had, it was like the inner suburbs of Dallas traditionally. But
Yeah.
then when we moved in, really the demographics started to change. I remember the neighborhood's kids. We had white kids, black kids, a lot of Latino kids. So it was, to me, it was a really good learning experience to learn about the different cultures and also some of the negative things. I remember drug addictions was really big in those times. And again, nobody really talked about it. That was really taboo that nobody really even addressed the crack epidemic. Everything was lock them up. It
That's right. That's exactly what it was.
yeah, so then
So I
once
want to
I
go back to something because you hit on this organic kind of activity. I remember when I was a kid, we'd play tackle the man with the football or whatever we'd come up with this game. It's like flashlight, hide and seek. But if I flash you with the light, it's dark. Or we're playing until 9, 10, 11 at night. Those were the days and those are a lot of fun. So I agree. That's something said for that. And something I push my kid to he's 14 now. And he'll go fishing at where he lives in Roy City. There's a pond there. He'll take his next door neighbor and they'll go fishing as much as possible just to hang out and do things together. And I love that.
yeah, and I think especially in those days,
Yeah.
just having that learning experience, right? Because I didn't know much about other cultures. I didn't know much about even English, right? English,
Yeah.
kind of how people spoke. To me, those were really organic opportunities to learn and learn through movement. And to me, that was really powerful. So yeah, so then I grew up, got a little bit older now. We're talking about kind of the middle school years. And I really enjoyed all sports, basketball, football, any team sport I really enjoyed. But again, I didn't really have that experience of playing kind of the organized, the traditional pee-wee, whatever.
So
So
did you feel like you were behind in eighth or ninth grade? Then you're behind the curve if you're not playing. If you decided to play football or any other sport.
Yeah, in a way, because I remember trying out for the basketball team, and I was pretty tall. Like right now, I'm 6 foot, which is pretty tall,
Yeah.
or I would say average, but it's pretty tall for most Latinos. So I really enjoyed it, but again, I didn't have the technique, right? So I remember getting cut from the team or the tryouts because a lot of the classmates, they knew the drills, they knew the techniques,
Yeah.
they knew the positioning and all that. And that was something that I had no experience in. And that kind of segued into what sport can I do, right?
Yeah.
What sport is going to be, or am I capable of participating in? And that's how I found track, because track is really one of those sports where you don't really cut people. And really cross country too. If you want to run, whether you run fast or slow, most track or cross country coaches, they'll either put you on the JV, but they're really
Yeah.
not going to cut you, right? So that's how I got into running. And I remember in middle school, this was probably like late 90s, you had football season. And then after the football season, then that was the track season. So a lot of the football players, they all got into sprinting. For me, it was like, I can do it and I can do it for a longer time than just one lap around it. So let me try some of the longer stuff back then. And that was considered the mile, right?
Yep.
The mile was like
Or
the,
even 2 miler in track.
right, like that was the long stuff. I remember having these football coaches and they would just tell me, we'll put you in the mile and do your thing. So I had no training. Back then, there was no knowledge of
Shoes and all that stuff.
yeah. So again, it was just real raw, but I remember just enjoying it. I remember from Pleasant Grove, we moved now to Richardson, and I remember the middle school, Richardson Junior High, and I remember it had a cinder track that it was like crushed brick.
Oh, wow.
And I remember just enjoying doing 10, 15 laps. And I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew that I liked
You like
going
running
along
around the
that.
track?
Yeah. So from the house, we're just going through a lot. There was a lot of, I would say, just a lot of issues at my house. So I would try to get away. I would try to, go out, and I knew where the track was, right?
Yeah.
So to me, that was always a place where I can go, enjoy the scenery, and that there wasn't a lot of people there. So to me, it was just a way of escaping, right? And
Yeah.
then from middle school, now we go into the high school. And that's where things got a little bit more serious. I remember the first day of cross country. I was in Richardson. They have 10, 11, and 12. So I was a sophomore by then. And I remember most of the team knew each other. There weren't really that many sophomores. But I remember the coach, he would say, go run 2 miles. And this was around the school and kind of into the neighborhoods.
Mhm.
And I was the last person. I was like behind the slowest girls.
Really?
And I remember just being out of breath. I remember not even able to jog those 2 miles. Yeah, so here I was maybe like 14,
Yeah.
15. And I remember I was like, why am I so out of shape? Like, why can't I keep up? So then the coach Estelle, and he knew about running. He was an older teacher, so he kind of knew. And what I was very appreciative of him was that he saw that rawness in me and he encouraged me. He said, right now, don't look at where you are now, look at where you want to be, right? So in that season, I remember in 10th grade, I went from not even able to jog 2 miles. The end of cross country, I was running, I think, in the 17-minute 5Ks. So that was just, and you're talking like from August to maybe November,
Yeah.
right? So if
That's the beauty. So I'll stop you there. That's the beauty about running is if you stay consistent just for a little bit, you'll see huge gains. And you saw crazy huge gains. So that's
Oh,
cool.
yeah. But again, it's to me, it was just someone that could identify
Yep.
what that rawness was because I would say a lot of coaches, especially at the high school level, they're just wanting the already product made, right? Like they
Yeah.
want kids that have played, they want kids that have.
Yeah.
So a lot of times I think what ends up happening is they miss that raw talent
Mhm.
that maybe some of these kids don't have that opportunity or they have the immigrant families that may
Yeah.
not even know about some of these options. But yeah, after a year, Coach Estelle, he quit coaching. I think there's just a lot of politics that were involved in athletics. And I guess what's interesting, fast forward till I graduated college and became a teacher myself, one of the things that I found was here in Texas, really the emphasis, especially in high school, is in football.
Yeah. Of
I
course.
remember interviewing for a position in Garland ISD, and I was telling them I'm interested in coaching track and cross country, and he was like, "If you're not going to coach football, we don't want you. We have nine football coaching positions, and that's our focus. We don't care about cross country or track. That's an afterthought."
Yeah.
So I think part of why Coach Estelle quit after that year is he was probably tired of kind of what that emphasis was.
That's a good
After
point.
that, the rest of my high school, I just had football coaches that, again, really you know, but you don't really know. Because that's not the emphasis, right? In the high school, again, I think I didn't really reach my potential. I think I was just running, but just doing my own thing. But then, in 11th grade, there was a gentleman, really influential. He really mentored me. His name is Bert Williams, and he still participates in a lot of track and field events. Like I know he's still part of the USATF, the local chapter in this area.
Yeah.
But Coach Williams, he really took me under his arm and I started to do what they called summer track. Again, I had no idea they even summer
He just
track
said do it and
exists.
you did it.
Yeah, yeah. Like I had no idea there was even summer track. I was just running because I liked it and that was something that I knew I wasn't going to get cut. So with Coach Williams, he had a lot of knowledge in sprinting. Like he really knew the 100, the 200, the 400. And again, here I am a more middle or long distance, whatever you want to
Distance
label it.
runner back then.
Right.
Sure.
But he really showed me like the art of the intervals. Like he really showed me drills. He showed me that the movements, the strength training, the importance of form. So when I was running with Coach Williams, to me, he really showed me the art of running. And I remember some of the workouts we would do like 12 by 200s, or we would do 8 by 400s. And I remember he would always stay at the last 100 and then he would sprint with me and then I had to keep up with him. So again, just a great personality, a great person, a great mentor. And I think the other gift that he provided me was he really put a light into you can run in college. Because again, before that, it was just like, I just want to do it because it gives me something to do and also helps me with kind of my
Sure.
mentality, right? Like my mental stability. Because again, I knew nothing about mental health. I knew nothing about intergenerational trauma. I knew nothing about depression or a lot of that grief. Everything was just get through school. You have to do better than us, and everything was just push, 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 right?
Yeah.
So really, Coach Williams, he gave me that outlet. He gave me that these people are going to college, they're running at the NCAA, and you can be like them. And really, by my senior year, that was my mentality. My mentality was, I'm gonna run in college, like, just because maybe I'm not gonna be able to compete or to make all state or all region, but I do think I can compete. And by senior year, that's when I was running pretty well. I think I ran in the 3,200, like low tens, maybe 1020, in the 1600, like a 440s, and the 800, I was running like low 2 minutes. The times were decent. And I remember Coach Williams, he was telling me there's a school in Idaho, there's a school in different areas, Kansas. But being an immigrant Latino, there's something in Spanish called familiarismo,
Hmm.
which there's not really a translation in English, but basically it means like a duty to your family.
Yeah.
And by that time, my brother had left. He went to Princeton in New Jersey.
Wow.
So I felt that duty to my parents, right?
Yeah.
Like I felt that obligation. One of the things that I realized is I do want to go to college. I do want to run and be competitive, but I also want to be close and watch out for my parents. So one of the things that I started to do, and again, Coach Barrett was a big part of this, is I started to look at kind of local universities and colleges.
Yep.
And one of the universities that stood out, again, I wasn't really fast, or I wasn't
Pretty
really
fast.
a D1
Yeah.
athlete. So to me, I was looking more at how can I still do what I like and then ultimately get my degree, because that's
Absolutely.
what I want.
1,000% smart.
There was a lady by the name of Francie LaRue Smith, and people might know her because she was a 6-time Olympian, and she lived, before she started coaching at the Southwestern University, she was living here in the Lake Highlands area. I believe she actually lived close to Norbuck Park when she was competing. But anyway, Francie LaRue Smith was very impressed by kind of her credentials, 6-time Olympian. You know, she ran,
Pretty impressive.
yeah, she ran anything from the 800 all the way to the marathon. I believe her last Olympics was Barcelona in 1992. So I was really impressed with her personal credentials. And I went to go visit that school, relatively small school. I think it at the time, I'm not sure now, but at the time it had about 1,200 students. And I was like, yeah, somewhere that I think I could be in. This is somewhere that I think I could thrive. I ended up applying and getting accepted. And that was the beginning of my journey into running and that transition into college. I believe friend, she had just started. I graduated high school in 2003, and then I started college in that same year. And she had maybe been there for 1 or 2 years, and she recruited myself and then two other freshmen, and we were like the top runners. Like we were it was another runner from Brownsville. His name's Aaron Contreras, who I still call a friend. So we connected, and that's where I really started to understand training because,
Mhm.
and with Coach Williams, it was a lot of speed, it was a
Yeah.
lot of dynamics, it was a lot of just explosiveness,
Yeah.
but there really wasn't understanding of endurance, right? With Coach Francie LaRue Smith, now we're doing things like hills, we're doing things like thresholds,
Mhm.
we're doing mile repeats. And I still remember some of these workouts. So this was in Georgetown, which is just north of Austin. And there was a park, Georgetown Park, close to the high school, between the university and the high school. And it was this trail of 2 miles, and we had this mile loop. And I remember one of the signature workouts was 5 mile repeats with 90-second rest.
Mhm.
And I remember at the peak of my college, me, myself, and Aaron, we would do these mile repeats at either just under 5 or above 5 minute per repeat.
Yeah.
And I remember doing those types of workouts and really understanding now the intersection between speed and endurance.
Mm.
And that's really where I felt like I started to thrive. Like now that rawness is going into like performance. And really you could tell because the times really dropped. Now I
Yeah.
was running low 16 5Ks. We ran cross country and those were 5 miles or 8Ks. We were doing low 27 minutes, 15 minutes. Now we're doing like low 4 minutes. So that's where a lot of those times really started to cut down. But really, again, it's because now you have someone that really knows what they're doing. And now you have partners that are at your level that are pushing you to get faster, stronger. So, really, especially that freshman year, to me, that's really where I think I honed in on just a lot of really knowledge, understanding kind of what the right level of speed versus speed endurance, but also understanding the importance of having people that are going to push you, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot
Of
of
course.
times when you're out there by going back to that middle school, high school, when you're out there by yourself, you don't really have a gauge. And I think now, even when I look at in Flower Mound, Coach Cook, I think part of why they have such a thriving high school program, their girls team, I think they won 3 or 4 state titles.
Mm.
Part of why, he's built such a strong program over there, I think it's because of that culture, right? We're gonna train together, we're gonna do things together, we're gonna suffer together. And when you build that mentality, it's almost like you have people that buy into that mindset. In college, again, I ended up, I remember, I believe it was my sophomore year, I ended up being all conference. And now people were talking about Southwestern. People were saying now we're competing, whereas before we're the joke of the school. And I remember, especially like during the summer, I remember one summer I stayed with Aaron in Brownsville to take some summer classes because his dad was a professor at UT Brownsville. And I remember just going out every day for an hour. Me, Aaron, and I just running for an hour. We didn't even look at the distance. We didn't look at the pace.
Just ran for
Yeah, we were just running for an hour. And that's also something I learned, right? Because this was before a lot of the GPS
Yeah.
technology is time on feet. I really had no idea what time on feet was. So a lot of these concepts, I started to make sense and I started to really understand kind of the art of running. And I started
Mm.
to understand where that intersection of endurance then intersects with speed, right? If I were to do it in a graph, if I were to quantify it, you have the y-axis and the x-axis, and then you have one line over here and one line over here, right? And again, it's an art. Even with modern training, the whole double threshold training, to me, that makes a lot of sense because you're pushing your endurance with that speed in order to replicate and simulate some race strategies, right? So again, those college years, that's where I really started to sharpen that knowledge, which I didn't really have in high school or middle school. So again, I'm eternally grateful to both Coach Williams and Coach Smith for really providing that guidance
For sure.
and to me, really setting that base that I think I needed because it's not that I didn't know. It's just again, as an immigrant kid, I would say, and I would say a lot of immigrant kids, they have this huge talent. If you think about it, I was born in San Luis Potosí, which is in central Mexico. It's 6,000 feet. Genetic wise, I think my ancestors, they've probably developed genetic wise a higher VO2. A lot of these immigrant kids or young people come and I would say they have very good genes. They're just not sharpened. And what's interesting, I remember as a kid, again, going back to soccer, I remember as a kid watching the World Cup coming to here and watching that really good game in the Cotton Bowl. And then people were saying the US is going to win the World Cup in 2010. And I remember how Nike was advertising. And I remember how people were comparing Freddie Adu to Pele. And what's so interesting, especially with soccer, is I think part of the reason why that obviously didn't happen is because that raw talent isn't really being developed.
Yeah.
When you have this whole
That's
notion,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, when you have this whole notion of pay for play, that's great for the kids that can afford it. But I would say a lot that rawness, that talent, a lot of kids, you're missing a lot of that talent. I think part of going back to soccer, right? When I look at like France, part of why they've been so successful is they've been able to tap into that raw talent and
Okay.
then they've been able to sharpen it with some really good coaching.
So important. The US is rarely, men's anyways, is rarely any good.
Yeah,
They might be decent, but they don't compare to most a lot of these countries. And I think you
right.
probably hit on a really good point. Anyway,
Yeah, so again, with running, really, especially here in Texas, right? Football is king,
yeah.
but cross country and track, that has been an afterthought. And then you put that with some of the rawness. I think it's so interesting because I think there's so much potential, especially working in the ISD. I really saw that rawness and I saw that potential. A lot of times it's just not developed. So
Yeah.
me, that was that story, and that was a big takeaway for me. But anyhow, I graduated college, and
Because you sound very never are you talk have you talked about, hey, I won this thing, or just a very humble person, but I assume you're extremely competitive. And when you're in college, you're probably even more competitive because you're running with some really fast guys, right? And training pretty hard. And how's that competitiveness? You obviously had that where you just like, oh, I'm just having fun, just enjoying it.
well, it's interesting you say that because again, and growing up, we didn't know about mental health, we didn't know
Yeah.
about any type of thing. So I remember in high school, here I was, just a immigrant kid. And I remember seeing teams like Plano, Highland Park, and I remember seeing what they had. They came in this fancy bus. They had the latest shoes, I think at the
Yeah.
time it was like the Zoom Kennedys. And I remember just having this rage. And I
Mm,
remember like I would run with rage. Like
mm,
when I was running, like I remember they had races like in Norba Park and at Richland
yeah.
College. And I remember this Highland Park kid, and I was like, there's no way this kid is going to pass me. So it was like mile 2 in the 5K.
Yeah.
And I would get to the point where I couldn't even breathe because I was just running with rage, right? Like I was running with this, it was almost like this envy,
Yeah.
envy that this person has it all, but I still have to beat that person.
Yeah.
And I also remember that
You're
rage in
pretty extreme.
college.
That's also a sign that you are very competitive too. Despite
Yeah, yeah,
all the other things
right,
that's going on from a rage standpoint, you're very competitive.
right. But I think it was just a lot of built up resentment and built up
Mhm.
anger, which ultimately isn't healthy. Like
Sure.
I think about it now, and I'm
Yeah.
like, there's no way that was healthy because it was like Growing up, being called names and,
Yeah.
well, especially growing up undocumented, it was almost like you couldn't say anything, right? It was like living in the shadows, right? You're there,
That'd have
but
been tough.
you're not there.
Yeah.
So to me, it was a lot of just built up anger that then I used, and I used it in running. And I see that a lot, especially with some of these young kids. My time working in the schools, I really understood some of the students, and I understood them at the personal level because I went through that journey. Yeah, you're right. It was a competitiveness, but I don't think it was a very healthy competitiveness
So
because,
I agree with you. It's so interesting that you said. Now, to talk about just like today, watching you run, I feel like races. Let's just say you run a race. I've seen you win local races or get close to winning or whatever, and you go all out. Like I'm looking at you and Cruz even. Like maybe you two are. I know you guys run together sometimes, but I feel like you're just dead after every race. Sometimes it's after the summer, but I'm like, these guys just are killing themselves in every single race. It's crazy to see it. I'm racing and I'll put it all out, but I'm not like feeling like I'm sprinting at the end. I'm dying. And you look like you've given it 1,000%, literally.
yeah, and maybe it brings back to those days, right?
Yeah,
People are creatures of habit. But I think overall, especially now, some of that mind shift has shifted.
of course. I would hope so.
But
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
you've got a lot
So
smarter and you understand yourself better. You understand the circumstances and all of those things. And basically, what I've heard is that running has helped you in a lot of ways, right? To deal with some of those anger or rage issues that you didn't know that you had, but that in a lot of ways helped you. And there's several people along the way from middle school, high school to college that helped you. And I think it's always good to have some of that help. And it's awesome that you recognize that.
yeah, of course. Again, I am eternally grateful to both Coach Williams and Coach Smith. I think and again, I would say I was a difficult person at the time because I just had a lot of different things that were building inside me. But also, as a licensed professional counselor, I will say, Chris, running is not therapy. Yeah. Oh,
I'm still here.
yeah. Okay. So I was just saying running is not therapy. Running is a great coping mechanism. It's something great for stress management. It's something great for building muscles and your cardiovascular and just getting into connecting with nature, connecting with other runners. But I will say, if you have complex trauma, if you have an eating disorder, if you have some kind of going into some of these psychopathological things, consider therapy. Like, people shouldn't be tiptoeing around you because they're scared that you're going to lash out. And with runners, and again, this is just a sidebar. With runners, there is a lot of issues that I've seen. And a lot of times there's just this stigma, and I get it. I completely get it because I grew up with that stigma.
Sure.
But I will also say that you can get better.
Yeah.
So me, running has helped me tremendously. That's why I still do it. I've been doing this for 25 plus years.
Yeah.
I have no plan on stopping, but I also understand the mental health aspect now that earlier me had no idea about.
I'm glad that you brought that up. And I had a podcast with my brother, and I don't think we got that cleared out. And the big reason why I wanted to have that podcast with him, but you brought it up and you were very articulate and clear about that, is that running is just one tool that you can use as a stress reliever to help you. But it's not going to fix what therapy can fix. You have to talk it out and understand how to deal with some of these things that you're dealing with. And I'm so glad that you brought that up. Look, you dealt with it as a kid and you was probably running more so than you just didn't know, right? But now we know we're smarter. And I've seen it too, Jose. Look, you see some of these people that had drug addiction or alcohol addiction and whatever led them to those kinds of things. They're out there. For example, there's some of the trail runners that are running 100 milers and they think they substitute whatever they had bad to run 100 milers or half marathons or whatever. And although it's a tool and helpful at the moment from a stress standpoint, it's not going to fix the issue or it doesn't help you completely deal with that. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, yeah. And again, I say this more as a professional rather than as a runner. Back to some of the journey. So I finished college and now I have a bachelor's degree in psychology, and I minored in religion. And then I didn't really know what to do with running because once you graduate, college is very structured, right?
Yeah.
And you get your cross country schedule, you get your track schedule, and then in the summer, you need to be running to get in shape for cross country and track. But once I graduated, it was like, what do you do? And most college runners actually just end up quitting, especially some of the guys I competed with, super talented, just understood running, but then once they graduated, they just stopped. And to me, I was like, this has helped me. As you said, this is a tool that has helped me. I don't want to let go of this tool.
Yeah.
Well, I graduated in 2006 and I didn't really know what to do. So then I was like, let me register for a marathon. That sounds like a good idea. People were talking about marathons. So I was like, okay, and again,
You're going to another level.
yeah, what was interesting is this was right before the recession of the
2008.
2000s. Yeah.
Yeah.
So whenever the recession hit, it made running just boom because people were, and that's true with other recessions, right? Because this is kind of a low budget or low money activity that people can do, and you don't really need a lot of equipment or things like that to do it.
Now you do. But anyways.
Right? The market made it that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, and again, this was before any GPS or any of that.
Super
I remember.
shoes. Stuff
Yeah,
like that.
I had the Timex. I had
Yeah.
the Ironman Timex, and that was,
I think I had the Nike Plus watch. I think that was the first watch to come. I don't know if it was back 2008. I think it was a little after that. Anyways, go ahead.
Yeah. So I graduated in the spring, and then I was like, what do I do? People were talking about marathons. I thought it would be a good idea to run a marathon, and I didn't really know which marathons. I knew that there's a marathon or several marathons in Texas, and I was like, well, why don't I register for the San Antonio Marathon? And back then it was called the San Antonio Marathon of the Americas. But the I didn't know it was a problem at the time because I was pretty cocky. I was, I just finished college. I ran in college. And again, at 21, you think you know everything. Little do they know. But anyway, I just started to continue training like I did in college. I would do mile repeats. I would do these tempos. I would do these 60-minute runs. And then I was like, okay, I'm ready for the marathon. So come November, I drive, I think it was like 6-7 hours to San Antonio. And I remember it started at the Alamo, finished at the Alamo Dome. They made a big deal. And there were some Kenyan runners that had come from Mexico. They had elite bibs. I was like, they look like some of the guys I competed with in college.
Sure.
So I was like, okay, let me see if I can
Let me stay with them.
Yeah. So and again, keep in mind,
I know where this is going.
My long run was probably 10 miles.
Yeah, exactly.
I was running 10 miles in like 60 minutes. So I was like, okay, if I can do 10 miles.
That's 10 miles only.
If I can do 10 miles, 60 minutes, then I could just double it and then I can close. And I should be doing the marathon at roughly 2:30. That was my thinking. So I went out and I remember passing the 20-mile marker and it was around 2 hours.
Okay.
But then I was like, okay, I only have about 30 minutes to go. And the guys that I was running with, they started speeding up. Like they went from 6 minutes because they were looking for the prize. Like they came to San Antonio for the prize money. Like that was their job, right? So that was like first and second place. For them, they went from 6 minutes now to 5:20s.
Mm-hmm.
And I did the reverse. So I went from 6 minutes to 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what was happening to my body. Like I've never experienced depletion of carbohydrates. And back then we didn't really know about goos and stuff like that. We were just drinking Gatorade. In practice and in college, they just had this big tub of Gatorade and that's what you got. So I remember just being in this long street, having 6 miles to go And I was just walking by that point. Like I wanted to drop out, but there's no way back. Like the
No,
only way back is
just walk home.
is to keep going.
Yeah.
But then nobody was passing me. Like it was just like deserted. And I was like, what is going on? I want to drop out, but I don't see a golf cart. So the last 6 miles took me 58 minutes. I ended up finishing in 2 hours and 58 minutes.
Still pretty impressive.
And I remember finishing at the Alamo Dome and then just sitting there. I was like, I started to question, like, why am I doing this? What's the point of this?
Like a lot of people
Um,
do.
yeah. But then to me, it was like, it's now I have to perfect it
Yeah. Oh, I like that.
because now now you know how difficult it is, right?
Yeah.
Now you know that it's almost like a challenge, right? And again, when you've been through all these different obstacles, now you know that this is just another obstacle to go through.
Yeah, I love that. This could be up for part two because I'm so intrigued in this marathon journey that you have. But this has been excellent, Jose. I love this. What a great journey you have. And if you want to come back to part two to tell the rest of that journey, I'd love to have you on again if you're interested.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
great. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to another DFW Running Talk. I'm Chris Detzel, and we just had Dr. Jose Lopez on our episode, and what a great journey. And we'll have him on again to finish up that journey. Thanks, everyone. And thank you, Jose.
Thanks.